Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and we are continuing with The Epic History of Russia by Epic History. And so last time we covered Epis Part 3, which was about the glory of Russia. Obviously we covered the Napoleonic era and Catherine the Great, which in retrospect was a really important era for Russia, obviously. And well, I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. I believe we're going to be talking about the Decembrist movement a bit, or at least it's going to be covered a little, mainly just because of the thumbnail, Tsar Alexander's brother being there. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to seeing more about this. We got this part and the next part, and I think that will be the end of the official history of Russia, though there are other videos about Russia that we'll probably be covering afterwards. And, yeah, I don't really have much else to add other than we should probably get to it. So, let's get to the history of Russia, part 4, what is to be done.
(1825). Victory over Napoleon had confirmed Russia's status as a world power. But there was discontent within Russia amongst intellectuals and army officers, some of whom had formed secret societies to plot the overthrow of Russia's autocratic system.
Yeah, so fortunately we covered the Decembrist movement. There is a two-part series on Epic History's channel, and last week we covered them. I'm sorry if I sound a little off right now, but yeah, so we saw part 1 and part 2, and obviously they failed in their overall objective at the time, but their legacy lived on and went on to inspire many future revolutionaries. So maybe in the long run, they didn't really lose. Like, I mean, they lost at the time with their own goal, but they did inspire future revolutionaries, and the Tsar was overthrown, as we know. So maybe in the way that Decembrists Beyond the Grave kind of got the last laugh. You know, it was definitely interesting learning about them, because it is, when we talk about Russian revolutions, you know, we mainly cover the one before, you know, the one where Lenin and Stalin, you know, the one during the World War I period. That's usually the period we talk about with Russia. So the Decembrists was definitely a really cool and I guess, enlightening view of a event that I didn't really know about. And yeah, just a really interesting thing to learn about. And that's why I really love all these history videos that we consume, because, you know, I'm always learning through them. And even subjects I am familiar with, there's always something new to be gauged and learn with. So that's why I really do enjoy these videos so much.
When Emperor Alexander was succeeded, not as expected by his brother Constantine, but by a younger brother Nicholas, one of these secret societies used the confusion to launch a military coup. But the Decembrist revolt, as it became known, was defeated by loyalist troops, and the ringleaders were hanged. Others were sent into internal exile in Siberia. This was to become a common sentence for criminals and political prisoners in Tsarist Russia. Nicholas went on to adopt an official doctrine of orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. The state was to rest on the pillars of church, Tsar, and the Russian national spirit, a clear rejection of the values of European liberalism.
Yeah, cause, well, first of all, I'm laughing because I'm remembering from the Decembrist thing, the revolt at I believe, at the town, where they just stood still for hours because the leaders were either not showing up or just not there, and they just got shot on. Like, I think that's probably the thing, that the leadership faltered, right? That's the biggest thing with the Decembrist thing. Leadership faltered and people lost heart. So, which is something, like, if you're gonna do a revolution and talk about killing your monarch, you have to be all in. You can't falter at the last minute and be like, I don't want to do this anymore, like, you know. I don't know. I found that funny. But, yeah, something like I mentioned before, Russia, by the time of, like, World War I, was a little behind in certain ideas compared to the rest of the world, you know? Like, with the rest of Europe, this whole Enlightenment and constitutional monarchies and whatnot. And even with the issue of serfdom, Russia worked out a little bit later, so they did slow down a bit. And I think the war with Japan really showed that. But that's just in a militaristic sense, because we saw just how fast Japan, you know, did. And Russia losing to Japan was kind of, you know, probably a big eye-opener, right? Of, in certain areas, they definitely were behind. And like I said, when we covered the Decembrist videos, it is interesting to know that Tsar Alexander at least seemed open to the idea of, like, you know, catching up with the rest of Europe and, you know, evolving, if you would, but then seeing the French Revolution and everything went down, he kind of backpedaled on some of his more radical ideas, or didn't go through with them. So, you know, that's definitely something interesting. Like, Russia was a bit behind for a brief period. At least by the time we get to, like, World War I era and a bit before, like, Russia was a bit behind in certain things to the rest of Europe. So, yeah, I just mentioned that because he does mention, you know, autocracy, I don't know how to just pronounce that right, but, you know, basically nationalism, the church, and obviously the Tsar, right? The three pillars, if you would.
In the Caucasus, border clashes with Persia led to a war which ended in complete Russian victory. The Treaty of Turkmenchai forced Persia to cede all its territories in the region to Russia and pay a large indemnity. Russian support for Greece in its war of independence against the Ottomans led to war between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Russian victory brought further gains in the Black Sea region.
Yeah, Russia really clapped the Ottomans, huh? Because every time I learn a little bit more about this conflict, yeah, Russia's usually doing incredibly well, if not winning. And, yeah. Also, the Greek War of Independence is something... Well, I'm just really interested in Greek culture, but I haven't really had time to cover it on this channel since, like, Alexander the Great and Pyrrhus of Epirus, so I am wanting to go back to Greece in the near future, because I'm just really obsessed at the point with their culture and history, but like I said, I haven't had much time, because there are other series to cover. I believe the poet Lord Byron fought and got himself killed in this conflict. Yeah, I just double-checked myself. Yes, he did join the Greek War of Independence, so he did not die in fighting. He died due to a fever and illness. I only really kind of know that because I'm an English major, and we kind of talked about him in one of my classes in the past. But, yeah, I'm sorry. We should probably get back to the main focus of the video.
British revolt, led by young army officers, was crushed by Russian troops. Alexander Pushkin, Russia's greatest poet, was shot in a duel, and 2 days later died from his wounds. Nicholas sent troops to help put down a Hungarian revolt against Austrian rule. The emperor's willingness to help suppress liberal revolts won him the nickname the gendarme, or policeman, of Europe. Russia's first major railway was opened, connecting St. Petersburg and Moscow. Alexander Herzen, a leading intellectual critic of Russia's autocracy, emigrated to London, where he continued to call for reform in his homeland. He'd later be described as the father of Russian socialism. The Ottoman Empire, now known as the sick man of Europe, reacted to further Russian provocations by declaring war. The Russian Black Sea Fleet inflicted a crushing defeat on the Turks at the Battle of Sinope. But Britain and France alarmed at Russia's southern expansion and potential control of Constantinople, declared war on Russia. The Allies landed troops in Crimea and besieged the naval base of Sevastopol, which fell after a grueling year-long siege.
Yeah, the Crimean War. Also, yeah, the Ottoman Empire was on decline. As we know, it fell, especially after World War I. But yeah, it was on decline, and you could kind of see it in its later performance, obviously getting beat up by Russia a lot. And even when Napoleon was in Egypt, like, he did do some serious damage to the Ottomans, so despite having a really sick and weakened force to some degree, you know? So, I don't know. It is interesting seeing, you know, it's always interesting seeing France and England work together, you know, to, because I'm so used to them being enemies, right? One of the greatest rivalries of all time. But, yeah, that's kind of the thing with European politics, right? They don't want any one nation getting too strong. They don't want any one, you know, like, if any nation expands a bit too much, everyone's like, hey, what are you doing? You know, that was a big thing with, like, Napoleon himself. They really wanted to curb his power, and it's interesting seeing the same thing with Russia, like, obviously alarmed at their growing power. So that just seems to be European politics. No one wants one nation to have, like, a hegemony, right? Hegemony? I don't know about the official word, but you know what I mean. Too powerful, right?
In the Baltic, British and French warships blockaded the Russian capital, St. Petersburg. Russia was forced to sign a humiliating peace, withdraw its forces from the Black Sea, and put on hold plans for further southern expansion. Nicholas I was succeeded by his son, Alexander II. The Crimean War had exposed Russia's weakness. The country lagged far behind its European rivals in industry, infrastructure, and military power.
Yep. That's kind of what I was, like, saying. Yeah, in some areas it started to fall behind, right? Why aren't there...
So Alexander, unlike his father, decided to embrace reform. The most obvious sign of Russia's backwardness was serfdom. According to the 1857 census, more than a third of Russians were serfs, forced to work their master's land with few rights, restrictions on movement, and their status passed down to their children. They were slaves in all but name. In 1861, Alexander II abolished serfdom in Russia. He was hailed as the liberator. But in reality, most former serfs remained trapped in serfdom.
Yeah, I remember this. We kind of covered it in the oversimplified video. But yeah, he said, you're free, but they still had to, like, kind of work. So they weren't really that free, to be honest. So, you know, they were free in all but name. They were free only in name, essentially. So yeah, but still, overall, I would say Alexander II at least showed promise in his willingness to try to reform, right? So that's something. Though obviously, as we know what happens after him, as I'm sure we're about to cover, yeah, it didn't work out.
Servitude and poverty. Alexander's reforms would continue with the creation of the Zemstva, provincial assemblies with authority over local affairs, including education and social welfare. In the Far East, Russia forced territorial concessions from a weakened China, leading to the founding of Vladivostok, Russia's major Pacific port. Another uprising by Poles and Lithuanians against Russian rule was once more crushed by the Russian army. In the Caucasus, Russia's long and brutal war against local tribes came to an end, with their leaders swearing oaths of loyalty to the Tsar. In Central Asia, the Russian Empire was gradually expanding southwards. Russian armies defeated the Emirate of Bukhara and the Khanate of Khiva, and by the 1880s, Russia had conquered most of what was then called Turkestan, today the countries of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Imperial rivalry in Central Asia between Russia and Britain led to the Great Game, a 19th century version of the Cold War. Centered on Afghanistan, diplomats and spies on both sides tried to win local support, extend their own influence, and limit the expansion of their rival, while avoiding direct military confrontation. Russia decided to sell Alaska to America for $7.2 million.
Wow, I did not know this. So yeah, the Great Game I had no idea about. It's nice. That's interesting. Essentially their own little Cold War there. And obviously Russia's huge, like just look at its landmass and it's insane how it keeps expanding. I'm like, it's like a nightmare to run. Like even the Romans with their empire, right? Eventually it got to a point where they're like, one person can't rule this. We have to cut it in half. Like, you know, like, and then look at Russia. I mean, like, it's huge, like, man. But, also, I did not know about this Alaska thing. I did not know that we got Alaska from Russia. That is interesting, wow. Not even I knew that, guys. Like, that's... I'm telling you, you learn something new every day.
Many Americans thought it was a waste of money. Gold and oil were only discovered there much later. Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace was published.
You know, the Russian movie adaptation of War and Peace is on YouTube. It's about 4 parts. I've actually been wanting to cover it. I was thinking about doing like a movie reaction to all 4 parts because I kind of want to watch another great Napoleonic epic, and I've heard that movie is as epic as it gets. So, you know, I'm definitely wanting to cover that one of these days. And also the novel itself, I actually read some of it. I haven't read all of it, but essentially, yeah, it takes place in the Napoleonic Wars. And it's just really interesting, essentially. So I'm gonna have to finish reading that before I watch the film. At the very least, you know. But yeah, definitely one of just the most important pieces of literature. Like, even here in America, you often hear among the greatest novels of all time, even this novel comes up a lot. War and Peace is one of the greats, you know? So obviously this book transcends, you know, just Russia, and it's just like one of the greatest, most renowned and revered pieces of literature of all time, you know? But it is long, which, you know, it's an epic, really, when you think about it, just by the sheer length, right? So, yeah.
Still regarded as one of the world's greatest works of literature. The late 19th century was a cultural golden age for Russia, a period of literary greats and outstanding composers. Russia, in support of nationalist revolts in the Balkans against Ottoman rule, went to war with the Ottoman Empire once more. Russian troops crossed the Danube, then with Bulgarian help, fought to secure the vital Shipka Pass. Then they launched a bloody 5-month siege of Plevna in Bulgaria. Russia and her allies finally won victory, with their troops threatening Constantinople itself. But at the Congress of Berlin, Russia bowed to international pressure and accepted limited gains, in a settlement that also led to independence for Romania, Serbia, Montenegro, and later Bulgaria. Meanwhile, within Russia, radical political groups were increasingly frustrated by Alexander II's limited reforms. There were several failed attempts to assassinate the emperor, but as he prepared to approve new constitutional reforms, he was killed in St. Petersburg by a bomb thrown by members of the People's Will, one of the world's first modern terrorist groups.
Wow.
This act of violence would lead only to a new era of repression. Did you know all epic history?
Yeah, so again, very interesting. I really loved what we did cover, obviously. I said I'm very interested in this long-running feud between Russia and the Ottomans, and it was definitely cool seeing more of that, learning some cool little facts, such as, you know, America's purchase of Alaska, the Crimean War, which I have heard about, but obviously, you know, I haven't done personal research into that yet, so it was cool learning about that and how Britain and France teamed up. You know, it's cool seeing the Great Game and what's going on here in the Middle East, I think. So, yeah, that's definitely cool. There are some really interesting things. And, yeah, overall, just another great video. Like I said, I just really love learning about this. So we're going to be getting to the fifth and final part of this series next time, which is the History of Russia Part 5. And that will be the official end of at least the History of Russia series name, though there will be other videos such as the Russian Revolution and many others. So I will be seeing you all in the next one. I'm going to go finish Part 5 of this series now. Bye, everyone.